Welcome to part 2 of the discussion on folate and pregnancy. We are going to talk a little bit more, around the gene mutation relevancy. We'll talk a little bit more about vitamins and some issues with them, and the issues that there are with B vitamins, and why I don't like prenatals, why they're synthetic, and how you can look for them. So in the previous video, we spoke about homocysteine and how that relates to B vitamins, and the reason why we want to consume folate while we're pregnant, or ideally before we're pregnant, is to help lower homocysteine. So when we're thinking of that, we can discuss a few reasons why B vitamins need copper and copper needs B vitamins. So I like to start with something that I touched on in the previous video, is that 46% of all of our copper in our body is actually in our bone marrow. So in our lymphatic system is where we are meant to have our copper. That's why when people are having their blood work done and they're measuring their copper, obviously in their blood, and they think that they're copper toxic because they have high copper, you're looking at where 1% of all the copper is in your body, and then trying to figure out what the other 99% is doing based on that one blood marker alone. That's part of why I don't like blood markers in isolation, because they're not telling us the whole picture. So when you think of it that way, well, 46% of my copper is meant to be in my bone marrow, and your B vitamins are actually a very rich source in your bone marrow as well. So to me, that means that if we're looking where the richest source of copper is, and it's a rich source of B vitamins, then they must need each other. And there's a copper researcher, his name is Leslie Clave. He said, "I can't speak for all B vitamins, but I can state with certainty that B9 is copper dependent." So folate is copper dependent. So when we are taking a folate supplement in isolation, it's really not what it needs, because it needs copper in order to be activated, because there's an inactive form and there's an active form of B vitamins. And a lot of women also think that they need a methylated B vitamin, but you're just swapping one synthetic thing for another, because when they're naturally occurring, then they have what we've evolved with, what our bodies need. A lot of the time we think that newer is better, that we think that, if it's this new procedure, that it has to be good because it's the newest thing. And we should really be questioning things, because just because it's new doesn't mean that it's better. And a lot of the times when we're looking at vitamins and supplements, that can be the case. So if we are thinking of folate or folic acid, then that can be part of our problem, is we're taking something that's synthetic. And I think a really simple way of looking at this is, if you were to go to McDonald's every single day, say somebody told you that McDonald's had the best nutrients, in this one meal, and that's where we could get ideally something for pregnancy. I don't know, I can't even think of what the folate. McDonald's has folate, that's what it's going to be. So if we were told, go to McDonald's every day, you get this cheeseburger because it has the highest amount of folate, and that can help prevent birth defects, that sounds ridiculous. I think most of us would agree that that just simply cannot be the case. But for whatever reason, when it comes in a bottle and we're thinking that it says prenatal on it, that it has to be good. And a lot of the times we're not questioning how it's made, what other ingredients that they're using, where is this B vitamin coming from? I feel like that's a good question. When we're looking at whole food forms of supplements, you know where those nutrients are coming from. They're coming from this whole food item, and that's where the nutrients are from. When you're looking at a multivitamin or a prenatal, how are they getting B vitamins in there? Well, a lot of B vitamins are coal tar derived, meaning that they come from petroleum. How they do that, I don't know. I just know that that's where they come from. I also know that there's an active and an inactive form, like we were talking about with the methylated vitamins. So whole food sources, they contain the copper in order to activate it. So even though you're taking a methylated vitamin, that doesn't mean that it's actually going to become activated. And Okay, so with that, so we have gone over how copper is needed for B9, so it's needed for folate in order to activate it. I feel like that's kind of important when we're talking about birth defects, if we're looking to prevent them, to making sure that they have what they need in order to be activated. It's the same narrative with lactoferrin. A lot of people get in a tizzy around how lactoferrin's better, but they don't think that ceruloplasmin is what activates it. And we need whole food vitamin C, we need some sodium, we need minerals, we need electrolytes, copper in order to make ceruloplasmin. So, okay, when we're thinking of iron's movement and focusing on vitamin D and vitamin A. So the process, to process sunlight, we have to synthesize vitamin D and break down vitamin A. So in like a completely basic thing, that's part of why light helps, why we need light, why it's so important. And for retinol to be activated, it needs sunlight and to be broken down into retinoids. So obviously, based on the name, retinoids, this comes from vitamin A in the form of retinol, and our retinas are going to help that happen. So the sunlight, super important to us. That's part of why, we want to make sure that we're getting sunlight on our eyes. We, don't obviously want to be staring up at the sun. But when we're out driving around, if it's especially before 10 a.m., that's really helpful to not be wearing sunglasses, help get the sunlight through our eyes. It's going to help with our circadian rhythm. It's going to help, though, with our vitamin A and vitamin D. And so our vitamin A and vitamin D process actually need B9. So on the other side, we synthesize, and on one side, we have a metabolic breakdown of molecules. So on vitamin D, synthesize, vitamin A, breakdown of molecules. Both of those processes require B9. And so since B9 is copper dependent, you can take all the methylated B vitamins that you want, but you don't have any solution if you don't have copper. So again, that's part of the issue. And also, like from looking at prenatals and multivitamins, a lot of them are in these ridiculous proportions that, I understand that whoever's formulating them has, I would like to hope anyway, has the best intention at heart, but it's really ludicrous. Like some of the amount of iron that's in these things, you only need 1 milligram of iron per day. Our body recycles iron. That's where our iron is supposed to come from. So when people think that they aren't absorbing iron, the issue is that their body's not recycling it. So when you're looking at these multivitamins, part of the issue is that they are in these ridiculous amounts that our bodies are not able to break down and absorb. So, zinc is typically higher than copper. That's an issue. They typically have iron. They typically have beta-carotene instead of retinol. So that's an issue, or they have synthetic forms of vitamin A, which I do find really confusing because for the narrative is to not consume vitamin A in the form of retinol because vitamin A toxicity is where birth defects come from. That's the narrative. But that study was done with synthetic vitamin A. If you look at a lot of the prenatals, a lot of them are made with synthetic vitamin A. So I really don't understand that because retinol is not the issue, it's the synthetic. The only issue that I've come across is if somebody was consuming polar bear liver, which I haven't ever found anybody who has access to polar bear liver, but that narrative that vitamin A is toxic, but then they go ahead and make a prenatal that has synthetic vitamin A in it. I really don't understand it. I think a lot of the things are backwards. So when we're looking at these things, whether or not a synthetic multivitamin or prenatal, whether or not that has enough folate in it is kind of irrelevant because it's whether or not there's nutrients there in order to activate it. And the answer would be no, because they're going to have different nutrients that are out of balance for our body. They're not going to be in the right forms, and that's part of the issue. So we're taking all of these, vitamins and minerals, but where do they go in the body? A lot of people like to think that we just pee them out, and I wish that was the case, but not. It's just gonna, basically, if you think of a car that doesn't have, I don't know, maybe it has like cheap oil in it, the gears aren't gonna go. Things are just not gonna move as smoothly, and that's gonna be our body. When we're talking about the MTHFR, what I like to think of it is as a lot of our genes, if you think of genes as in the sense of something triggering them. So for example, if somebody has the MTHFR, that doesn't mean that it's activated. What's going to activate the MTHFR is if our minerals are dysregulated, if we have too much iron in our tissues, things like that. And so the important thing to think of is whether or not we're going to flick that switch on or flick it off. And if we were to turn the light switch off, then we're going to have an issue. But we can actually prevent the light switch from going on in the first place. And that's the area that I like to live in. So if you think for a second of going for a walk, you want to go for a walk, but there's this bear that lives in the woods. Does it do you any favor to know where a bear is in the woods? It doesn't if you're going to stay on the trail. It's of zero relevancy if the bear is sleeping, you're not planning on poking it, you're going to stick to the trail. The bear is far off of the trail. You're going to be smart. You're not going to be doing ridiculous things that are going to wake this bear, and you're going to go on your walk anyway. Is it going to cause you more stress to know that that bear is in that area? You might find that you're more hypervigilant. There might be different things that come from it. But at the end of the day, the reality is it is of no significance of knowing that that bear is there because you don't intend to go and wake up the bear. And that's the only way that this bear, my hypothetical bear, is going to wake up. So if you think of that in terms of the MTHFR and us triggering it, iron is what's going to trigger that bear. And iron dysregulation and mineral dysregulation and that stress that's on the body, that's what triggers the bear. So if we just prevent that from happening in the first place, then that's how we make sure that that gene isn't activated, and then that's the real crux of it. But a lot of people like to think that we need a methylated or a synthetic vitamin in order to get there, and that's just simply doesn't make any sense to me. So let's see here. Let's see some of my notes. Now, there are so many different ways that we can go about getting B vitamins in our diet before we become pregnant and even when we are pregnant. I find it really interesting that legumes are on the list as a rich source of B vitamins because iron is regulated through blood loss and through our stool. Now, whether or not our stool is equal to blood loss, I don't know. I'm inclined to think that it's not as good as blood loss is. I think that's part of why women live longer than men is because we have our menstrual cycle. Our menstrual cycle helps us live longer. But when we are pregnant, then our body is going to rely on feces as our way to excrete the additional iron. And part of why I think that a lot of women have gallbladder issues and a lot of liver issues while they're pregnant is because we have this bolus of iron that we've been exposed to and don't realize that it's in our tissues. And then it puts extra pressure on the body because we're deficient in copper and bioavailable copper. We're told to avoid vitamin A while we're pregnant, so that it adds insult to injury. We're told to consume more iron. We're told to consume these synthetic vitamins, and then iron's trying to be regulated through feces, and that's really where you're going to see constipation and loose stool bowel movements and things like that come from, because that has to do with our bile and our gallbladder and the liver trying to regulate things. So look for things like avocado, look for beef liver, egg yolks, legumes, even some broccoli, spinach, and asparagus. Those are some great places to check out. But I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one.